Yes guys, welcome back to another Fantasy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho and in this video we are going to be looking at the top transfers going into game week 31. We're going to be looking at potential Rashford replacements, Shaw replacements and a differential that I think if you're chasing rank could be the ultimate punt. So if you are new around here, please do consider hitting that subscribe button, and if you enjoyed the video, please do drop a like. It is always much appreciated. So without further ado, let's get started. So first up, we're going to come on to those potential Rashford replacements. Now, it's worth noting, at the time of recording, we don't know the severity of Rashford's injury, so we don't know whether he's going to miss 1 week or potentially up to a month. My first advice is do not make any early transfers. I know a lot of the FPL community have started to sell Rashford, and I really think the best thing to do is just to hold your horses right now, but get a bit of an understanding on which player you might want to bring in if we do see that he is out. I personally think that if you are on the free hit 32 strategy, you should potentially look to hold him up until game week 33, and then we can reassess and understand whether he is worth selling or not. But if Ten Hag does come out on Friday and say that Rashford is out until the end of the season, then we need to start considering some of these alternative options. And the two that I've decided to focus on for this particular video is going to be the Man City pair in Gundogan and Jack Grealish. Now, of course, Jack Grealish is the one recently who was getting the plaudits off the back of a fantastic display against Southampton in game week 13. Of course, another fantastic display previously on in the other game week. So he is definitely the one that the FPL community are talking about and moving towards. But it is worth noting that Gundogan is also throwing his hat in the conversation. And as I said, Grealish is getting the love. He's currently the most bought player going into game week 31, with a lot of managers moving on Rashford. So it is worth noting that the community are moving towards Grealish rather than Gundogan. But I want to make sure that you guys understand that both are still fantastic differentials. Grealish at the time of recording is currently 6.9% owned. But of course, with a lot of managers buying him, and if Rashford is out, I can imagine that ownership getting more towards 10% by the end of game week 31 deadline. And Gundogan in himself is only 2.3% owned. If you're looking for that real punt, then Gundogan is definitely the one to go for based on just the ownership alone. Now, looking at the two in comparison, you can see the underlying numbers on your screen here, and these are based after post-World Cup. So game week 17 up until game week 30. And it's worth noting that Gundogan has actually started 10 of the last 11 league matches, and Grealish has actually started 11 of the 11 league matches. So both of these have been ever-present in the Man City team. So I don't think necessarily we need to worry about these not being in Pep Guardiola's starting 11. So coming on to the underlying numbers, you can see here first and foremost Grealish being the slightly cheaper option, which may sway a few managers who have not much available in the bank. Based on expected goals, Gundogan is leading the way, and that's not a surprise really based on the way that he operates in this Man City team. With the formation and then playing a 3-2-2-3, Gundogan and De Bruyne are given license to arrive late into the box, and that's what we're seeing with Gundogan, who is so very, very good at that, and we've seen that in previous seasons with him picking up goals. 0.3 XG per 90 compared to Grealish's 0.22 is really promising reading for both Man City midfielders. But it's the expected assists where Grealish is really coming into his own. 0.29 expected assists per 90 compared to Gundogan's 0.07. So what we're seeing here is, in this sample size, Grealish being much more of a well-rounded FPL option, whereas Gundogan being much more of the goal threat in comparison to Grealish, and offering naturally what we kind of get attracted to is the goal scorer. But when I do look at these underlying numbers, I do think to myself, Grealish maybe has a few more strings to his bow and avenues for FPL points. Now, as I discussed, Gundogan is the one that is getting in these goal scoring opportunities, and that's reflected in the big chances per 90, 0.6 compared to Grealish's 0.31. But again, as I said, Grealish is much more well-rounded, and that is reflected in the expected FPL points, 5.25 to Gundogan's 4.38. Now, looking forward into the upcoming game weeks, game week 31 in isolation, Grealish is leading the way for projected points, and over the next 3 game weeks, Grealish is also leading the way. But we do need to highlight the fixtures coming up for Man City. They have a fantastic home fixture against Leicester, who are looking shocking right now. Then they have the blank in game week 32 due to the semi-final of the FA Cup. And then they have that massive title clash against Arsenal in game week 33. So first and foremost, if you're in a position right now where you're not free hitting in game week 32, maybe the Man City assets are ones to avoid right now, as they are going to cause you headaches in game week 32. But if you are planning on free hitting in game week 32, then I really think both of these are fantastic options for you to consider. Now, based on the underlying numbers, the ownership, the value, and the fixtures, I really do think that Gundogan is going to be one that a lot of managers are going to avoid, but could easily be the one that we should have gone for. But I think based on the numbers, based on the starts that Jack Grealish has had, I think Jack Grealish is the best Rashford replacement if we are looking for a player in and around that same price point. I think he offers the guaranteed game time. He's in fantastic form right now, and you can see the confidence is really instilled with him. He feels like he is definitely a Pep Guardiola player now. And what I would also say is I don't think there is as much rotation risk with Grealish. That left side looks pretty locked on for him, whereas the right flank, maybe Foden when he is available, could rotate with Mahrez or even Julian Alvarez on that right flank. I haven't seen anyone operate on that left side that could cause Jack Grealish potential worries for expected minutes. Now, the last thing I want to do before we conclude this is, of course, the Champions League. Man City are playing in the Champions League, of course, tomorrow or today based on the recording. So we do need to take knowledge that that is going to impact potential minutes in game week 31 against Leicester. So please do not make any early transfers. There is a lot of games still to happen between now and game week 31 because of the Champions League. So make sure if you are going to make the transfer, you make it closer to the deadline, because we'll get a bit more of an understanding on the Rashford injury update and also whether these assets are still viable, whether their fitness is good enough or not for game week 31. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. I'd be really interested to know if you are team Grealish or Gundogan. For me, if I had to make one, I would go for Jack Grealish right now, but I think Gundogan is a really interesting differential. Now, talking about differentials, this is a nice segue. Let's discuss a very lowly owned player that I think could be a fantastic punt for those that are maybe chasing mini leagues or chasing overall ranks. Now that is going to be the man of the moment, Olise, who at Crystal Palace conducted that fantastic second half performance against Leeds, where they ended up running riot at 5-1. And he's been a really interesting player this season because we really haven't seen the best of him. We know there is bags of talent with this player, but Patrick Vieira just didn't really get an opportunity to really show what he could do in that system. Now, Roy Hodgson's come in charge. In the last two games, Crystal Palace have played free-flowing football and have looked fantastic. And Olise, alongside Eze, are the ones that have really benefited from the introduction of Roy Hodgson. But again, we need to remember it is an incredibly small sample size when we are looking at these two players, in particular Olise. Now, at 5.4 million, he is a fantastic price, but we do need to remember that he is competing alongside some very, very popular assets like the Brighton assets, Matoma, McAllister and March. And of course, cheaper options are available like Andreas Pereira. And then, of course, we do need to consider the other options available like the Arsenal assets, like the Liverpool assets. So firstly, I want to say Olise could be a tricky player to fit into your team structure. But if you are chasing rank, then this could be the one. 0.7% owned is ridiculous. And the long-term fixtures of Palace are fantastic. They're basically the best or close to the best fixtures between now and the end of the season. So this is very much a move that you could just bring in and let it hold for the rest of the season. Next three, Southampton away, Everton at home and Wolves away. Some would argue that these are going to be very tricky fixtures because they are also relegation battling teams. But the way that Crystal Palace are playing right now in this quite attacking football, I think this is really going to benefit the attackers in this Crystal Palace team, whereas the defenders may be a bit more hindered. Now, you can see the underlying stats here. This is based on post-World Cup, so of course this is a mixture of both Patrick Vieira and Roy Hodgson's time in charge. 0.11 XG per 90, but we know with Olise we are getting much more of a chance creator rather than a goal scorer, and you can see that in the expected assists per 90, 0.26, and big chances per 90. This is where he comes into his own, 0.49 per 90. So he really is on all those set pieces, getting into some fantastic positions and really creating a lot of chances for Crystal Palace, in particular in the absence of Wilfried Zaha. Now, the one thing I want to note is, of course, Eze being at the same price at 5.4 million. I just wanted to quickly read through the underlying numbers for both of these players since Roy Hodgson has been in charge. That's been 2 league matches, so an incredibly small sample size. But in these last 2 game weeks, expected goals per 90, Eze has been at 0.31, Olise at 0.15. Expected assists per 90, 0.16 for Eze, 0.66 for Olise. And bonus points per 90, 0.5 per 90 for Eze, 1.5 for Olise. And it's worth noting the bonus point baseline for both of these players is fantastic because they create so much in this team, because they are the heartbeat of everything good. Their baseline is fantastic. So if they were to pick up an assist or a goal, in particular Olise, he is guaranteed to be in amongst the bonus points. So that is worth considering when we are looking at these cheaper options. Those players that do rack up the bonus points are the difference between good players and fantastic players. Now, as I mentioned, bringing in Olise into our teams might be quite a difficult task. No one's really going to be selling their Brighton assets because they double in game week 34. Very difficult to move away from Arsenal assets because a lot of people are going up to Liverpool assets. So he might be a tricky sell for a few managers out there. But if you are in a position where maybe you're sat on a James Maddison, maybe you're sat on a Marcus Rashford and you're looking for some alternatives out there, this could be the one for you. As I said, the fixtures long-term are fantastic. He's playing very well in this Roy Hodgson team, even though it is such a small sample size. And I do think if you are chasing rank, this could be the man to go for. The one thing I want to say, no double game week for Crystal Palace. So if you are really chasing those players that have additional fixtures, maybe avoiding Olise is the one. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll be super interested to know if anybody's taking the punt right now on Olise. As I said, less than 1% owned could be an absolute gem of an FPL option. Now, last up, we're going to come on to some potential sure alternatives that we need to consider if the news is bad. Now, similar to the situation with Rashford, the injury status to Shaw is very unclear right now, and I really do urge managers to not make any early moves regarding Luke Shaw. Similar to Rashford, if you are on the free hit strategy 32, you could, if you have the squad depth, bench Luke Shaw in game week 31, use your free hit in 32, and then reassess in game week 33 whether Luke Shaw is going to be available for that important double game week 34. And one would argue if he is available for the double game week 34, he could be worth that long-term hold, even though he is going to be missing game week 31 and game week 33. But I think it's worth noting, similar to the Rashford situation, just getting a few ideas on what potential moves you might go down if we do get the introduction that Shaw is out for the foreseeable future. And we've got a very varied selection of players here. Trent Alexander-Arnold at 7.3 million, Stones at 5.4 million, and Guy at 4.4 alongside Aston Villa's Moreno. Now, the underlying numbers that you can see on your screen here are based on post-World Cup again, so game week 17 up until game week 30. And of course, some of these underlying numbers are going to be benefiting those fullbacks in comparison to centre-backs, because of course, it's tough to compare the attacking output of Trent compared to Stones. But you can see here, expected goals per 90, Mark Guy leads the way, but it's not necessarily anything to scream and shout about. And of course, in the expected assist department, Trent is leading the way at 0.38, but nobody is surprised about that. But I am very impressed with the 0.17 expected assist per 90 for Moreno, in particular with the fact that Aston Villa have kept 5 clean sheets in their last 7 games. Unai Emery is working magic in that team. But the one I want to draw your attention to is the expected goals conceded for their respective teams. Now, Stones is ridiculous in this Man City team. 0.71 expected goals conceded for Man City post-World Cup is ridiculous and far and beyond anything that's Liverpool, Palace or Aston Villa have been posting. And I want to draw your attention to Aston Villa here because even though they have kept 5 clean sheets in the last 7, based on the underlying numbers, they've actually been very lucky to get these clean sheets. 1.58 expected goals conceded per 90 for them suggests that the defensive displays have been overperforming and we could see a regression to the norm with them conceding some goals in the upcoming fixtures. Both Liverpool and Crystal Palace don't necessarily have the best underlying numbers, but of course with Liverpool, very tricky team to predict right now. They could roll out and have an amazing performance like they did against Arsenal, and then they could go and lose the following game week against a relegation team. So really tough to predict Liverpool, but Man City are shoulders ahead of everybody when it comes to defensive numbers. Now, based on expected FPL points, Stones leads the way for game week 31. Generally. And in game week 31, Trent leads the way alongside Guy at 3.5, Stones at 3.2, and Moreno at 2.7. Now, I want to quickly run through these players just briefly, just to give you my overall thoughts on them. Trent, of course, being the most expensive at 7.3 million, you need a lot of money in the bank to justify this move. Trent works really well if you were not free hitting in game week 32. They have a great fixture in 32, and long term the fixtures are fantastic for Liverpool. They don't play in any cups, so you know Klopp is fully focused on this Premier League run. And realistically, there's going to be no rotation worries with Trent Alexander-Arnold. Famous last words, but I don't think he will get rotated. Double game week 34 is worth noting as well, a fantastic double as well, both at home, and we know Liverpool's home form has been incredible in comparison to their away form. The big thing is the price. Can you justify it? I think if you're chasing rank, going in early doors on Trent Alexander-Arnold is quite a good move. Yes, you are going to have to maybe have a cash cow in your team to justify the move to bring him in. But I think long term, we are all going to want him for game week 34 in that double. So if you can get him in 3 game weeks early and get that potential attack and returns alongside maybe the odd clean sheet, he could be the differential of all of them out there. So I really like the move to Trent, but I do appreciate that it's a very difficult move for a lot of managers out there, and one quite hard to justify right now with the Liverpool defensive problems that we are seeing on display. Now, moving on to John Stones, the big worry here is minutes. He came off slightly early in the game, in game week 30 against Southampton, and they have the Champions League to contend with. They are playing against Bayern Munich this week. They then have game week 31 against Leicester, and then they have the second leg against Bayern before before the FA Cup semi-final. So they have plenty of games to contend with. And the big question mark right now is John Stones going to play all these minutes? Because they have the likes of Laporte waiting in the wings. They can play Kyle Walker at right back, because right now Stones has basically been playing that inverted right fullback position. So we could see Kyle Walker also operate that in the league. That's the big worry right now. And at 5.4 million, one would argue you could go a little bit cheaper with Ake, whose minutes seem to be just as good as John Stones. The big thing I love about Man City, double game week in 34 and double game week in 37 most likely to be announced. So even though they blank in game week 32, and again, if you're not free hitting in 32, I wouldn't be bringing in John Stones. But if you are, he could be a really nice long-term move between now and the end of the season. Minutes, that's one thing I can't guarantee you. He could get rotated from time to time, in particular if Man City go deeper into the Champions League. Now, Crystal Palace's Mark Guy, great long-term fixtures, but the defence not so solid. Do you want investment in the Crystal Palace defence? That's my big question to you. But they cover game week 32 okay. He could be a nice cheap enabler if you are looking to downgrade that position. And Alex Moreno has been fantastic from the attacking numbers. As I mentioned, 5 clean sheets in the last 7. The problem, the fixtures are starting to turn for Aston Villa. And with these numbers, the expected goals conceded per team, I think that we are going to see Aston Villa concede a few more goals as the games get tougher, and we're going to see this underlying number start to actually result in goals conceded eventually. It is just going to happen, is how it works. So if I had to rank right now, I think Trent is the go-to, but I appreciate it's a very difficult purchase. Stones I really do like, but again, can you bring him in with that minutes risk? Guy and Moreno, if I had to go for one, I probably would go for Guy, but I'm not really too tempted by these cheap options available to us right now. The main advice is hold on to Luke Shaw for now until we get an update on his fitness. So that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 31 top transfers. I really hope it's provided some value and helped you with your transfer queries. Again, if you did enjoy it, please do consider hitting that subscribe button and drop a like if you did enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.